How's it going? Was it confirmed to be arsenic poisoning? Jacqueline nodded vigorously. Yes, Old Chin is already inside. Greg Wang quickly entered the room, where 2 beds were placed, each bearing the body of Vincent Fan and his wife, Jiang Ping. Both lay with their eyes closed, their complexions pale and gaunt, exhibiting severe symptoms of dehydration. Beside them, Dr. Chen was meticulously examining the bodies. Turning to see Greg Wang, he stood up and said, "Boss, the hospital reported it as acute arsenic poisoning, and the symptoms completely match. We can confirm it once we take the body tissues back for examination." Greg Wang pursed his lips and turned to Jacqueline. "What exactly is going on with this whole situation?" "We've just preliminarily questioned all the doctors involved. Around 1 p.m. yesterday, the hospital received an emergency call from Vincent Fan, and his voice was already off. The ambulance rushed to the Dijingyuan residential complex where Director Fan lived. When they rang the doorbell, Director Fan came out clutching his stomach, and Jiang Ping could no longer stand up. They were quickly taken to the hospital for rescue, but after a long struggle, they couldn't be saved. Both died. Greg Wang turned and called over a police officer. "Did your chief not come to work yesterday?" The officer replied, "The chief didn't come in the morning, and we only found out about this in the afternoon. The chief's children just received the news and are preparing to rush over tonight." Greg Wang pondered for a moment and then asked Dr. Chen, "How long does it take for arsenic poisoning to manifest?" Based on the symptoms described by the hospital and the condition of the two, the dosage in their bodies would only take a few hours to manifest. "So, you're saying they were poisoned yesterday morning?" "Exactly." He continued to question the police officer. "Your chief lived in Dijingyuan?" "Yes, that's correct." "Isn't Dijingyuan where many of the county leaders live, and I heard the security is very tight?" Jacqueline said, "Yes, I once had to enter the complex for work, and the security stopped me. They checked my ID and only let me in after registering." Greg Wang let out a long sigh. "All right, gather some more people, and Old Chin, hurry up and get your team up. Head to Dijingyuan to investigate and collect evidence. The rest of you stay here to guard. Also, tell the hospital doctors not to spread the word, and immediately disperse the onlookers outside." He felt a heavy weight on his heart. From the information gathered, Vincent Fan was poisoned at home, and it happened in Dijingyuan, a residential complex full of leaders. Murder right at the doorstep of county leaders. This incident, as the deputy director of the county bureau, was inevitably too much for him to bear. Outside, the wind and rain were fierce, and the weather was cold and biting. Still in the car, the director called, asking Greg Wang how to handle this situation. Greg Wang, full of worries, knew this matter had to be reported higher up, and there was nothing he could do about it. The director's tone was not very polite, with the previous unsolved murder cases, and now a public security officer poisoned in a residential complex where county leaders lived. The responsibility wouldn't just fall on the deputy director in charge of criminal investigation. He, as the director, couldn't escape it either. As a director who didn't understand criminal investigation, he usually only asked about Greg Wang's progress in cases and had no ability to intervene. Now that this incident occurred, someone from the province was sure to come tomorrow. After listening to Greg Wang, he could only advise him to hurry to Dijingyuan to look for clues, while he thought about how to deal with the people from the province tomorrow. Upon reaching the entrance of the complex, after a brief conversation with the duty security guard, they were immediately let in, and 4 police cars drove in grandly. Guided by the security, they quickly arrived at Vincent Fan's door, had the security find the keys to open the door, and several professionals, including Greg Wang, carefully put on gloves and shoe covers before entering the house. The house emitted a foul smell, as there were some dirty vomit and excrement on the floor. Old Chin explained that severe vomiting and diarrhea followed by rapid dehydration leading to death were typical symptoms of acute arsenic poisoning. Even with timely fluid replacement, death could occur due to organ failure if the dosage was lethal. Once symptoms began, it was almost impossible to save the patient. Greg Wang's expression darkened. After inspecting the living room and finding nothing but the filth on the floor, they moved on to the dining room. A large Western-style dining table held several plates of side dishes and bowls, indicating porridge had been consumed. Additionally, there were 2 empty glass milk bottles. Without waiting for Greg Wang's instructions, the experienced Dr. Chen directed his team to carefully pack up all the leftover food and utensils for testing. After inspecting every room without finding any suspicious items, Greg Wang scratched his head in frustration and said, "I just asked the security guard. He said Vincent Fan didn't leave the house yesterday morning, and in the afternoon, he was directly taken to the hospital by ambulance. It seems the poison was administered at home." "Old Chen, do you think it could be something they ate?" Dr. Chen nodded. "This time, we didn't find any spray bottles like in the Li family case, and since arsenic compounds are solid, it's unlikely they were poisoned through the air. The dosage wouldn't be lethal in general circumstances. It must have been ingested through food." Greg Wang nodded. "The porridge was definitely made at home, and we saw in the fridge that the side dishes were taken from there. Judging by the leftovers, they weren't just started yesterday. The most suspicious thing left is the milk." "Exactly, this type of bottled milk is delivered, and the milk factory delivers it every morning. If the murderer poisoned the milk, it would be the most effective method." Greg Wang puzzled. If it really was the milk that was poisoned, how did the murderer do it? How did they manage to get the poison into the milk? "Right, let's first check the milk box at the door." They went to the villa's entrance and immediately noticed something. A milk box hung on the wall next to the iron gate, with a printed paper inserted above it, now wet from the rain and snow but still legible. It read, "The company will be removing and replacing milk boxes for all customers in batches. Please keep your keys safe." Greg Wang looked more closely behind the milk box and realized it wasn't screwed onto the wall but glued on with super glue. He quickly called over Dr. Chen to check for fingerprints on the milk box. Dr. Chen was not hopeful. First, the murderer had never left fingerprints, and second, in this rainy weather, it would be difficult to preserve any fingerprints. After spraying a liquid on the milk box and examining it with a fluorescent light, he shook his head. Greg Wang sighed in annoyance and ordered someone to bring tools to pry the milk box off the wall and take it away. After removing it, they clearly saw 2 screw holes next to the super glue, obviously left by the previous, real milk box. Suddenly, Greg Wang was stunned. He realized that after the real milkman delivered the milk, the murderer came to the milk box, pried off the real one, and glued their fake milk box to the wall, containing 2 bottles of deadly poison milk. This crime was clearly meticulously planned, with the murderer paying great attention to detail. Firstly, the key to the real milk box was inside the house. If the murderer wanted to poison the real milk, the gap on the box was too small to see what kind of milk was inside, making it difficult to inject poison with a tool. Secondly, even if they somehow managed to inject poison with a bendable syringe, the puncture hole on the sealed milk might alert Vincent Fan, a police officer. Thirdly, the murderer couldn't directly pry open the milk box to replace the milk because if the lock was broken, it would easily alert the homeowner. So, the murderer opted to replace the entire milk box. Fourth, the murderer had to wait until the real milkman had finished delivering the milk before acting. Otherwise, if they replaced the box first and the real milkman came and found the key didn't fit, they would surely tell the homeowner. Fifth, the murderer chose super glue to attach the fake milk box to the wall instead of mimicking the real one by screwing it in because prying open a milk box with tools wouldn't make noise, but installing a milk box with screws would, potentially waking up people sleeping in the complex. Sixth, in terms of timing, the murderer must have been watching and waiting nearby. As soon as they saw the real milkman leave, they acted immediately. Otherwise, if it was too late, the Fan family might have already come out to get the milk, ruining their plan. Just the process of poisoning the milk involved several steps, revealing the murderer's meticulous attention to criminal detail. Greg Wang felt a chill down his spine, a fear he had never experienced in his policing career. Indeed, he had never encountered such a cunning opponent. At that moment, someone holding an umbrella approached. It was the county party secretary, who lived in the same complex, causing Greg Wang to feel even more troubled. The secretary's expression was somber, showing no emotion, as he said, "Old Wang, I heard Vincent Fan and his wife were poisoned to death?" Greg Wang could only respond, "Yes, Secretary Lee, our director has already reported it." Poisoned to death here? Greg Wang felt somewhat helpless and could only awkwardly agree. The secretary seemed somewhat annoyed as he exhaled deeply. "I heard that the Jiang and Li families were also poisoned to death a few weeks ago, and your Public Security Bureau hasn't solved the case yet. Is this the work of the same person?" We can't completely determine that yet." The secretary snorted coldly. "Even in our complex, such incidents occur. It's time for your Public Security Bureau to take action." With that, he turned and left with a stern face. The criminal investigation team members around were gritting their teeth. If anyone else had said such words, they would have been unable to resist beating them up. They had been working hard on the case for over a month, only to be accused of doing nothing. Who could stand that? Including Jacqueline, everyone felt indignant on behalf of Greg Wang. Many were cursing under their breath, "What has that corrupt official ever done for the people? If he's so capable, let him come and investigate." Greg Wang was trying to calm his team down, telling them to let it go and cool off. He knew the responsibility lay with him as the supervisor. He also understood that this incident had completely ruined his already stagnant career. He gave a bitter smile, realizing that if the case dragged on, he would definitely be demoted and transferred to a department like the Cultural Relics Protection Department, which was essentially a retirement post. What's done is done, and complaining was useless. Who would have thought that the next target of the murderer would be Vincent Fan, the police station chief who knew about the case and lived in this community? He was trying to control his emotions, arranging for someone to get the community surveillance footage from the security guards, while leaving 2 people behind to guard the scene. However, he also told them not to overwork themselves. Since there weren't many outsiders in the community, they just needed to park the police car firmly in front of the villa to block anyone from entering and could catch up on some sleep in the car. After giving his orders, he told the rest to go back and rest, and that they would start the various investigative works after daybreak. He closed his umbrella, slightly closed his eyes and looked up, standing hesitantly for a moment in the rain and snow, took a deep breath of the cold night air, his expression desolate as he heavily stepped into the car. He had completely lost the desire to sleep, preparing himself for the reprimand he would face at the county bureau tomorrow. Just after noon, Jacqueline rushed into the office and whispered, "Boss, the special task force from the provincial department has arrived. They've already spoken with the director, and now the team leader of the special task force is waiting for you in the small conference room for a private talk." "A private talk with me?" Greg Wang frowned. He had already resigned himself to taking the blame. Let it be, he thought tiredly as he stood up, stretched, took a deep breath, and walked towards the door. Upon entering, Greg Wang could never have imagined that the leader of the special task force sent by the provincial department would be a familiar face. The man across from him was about 60 years old, with slightly graying hair, wearing glasses, and dressed in the uniform of a first-grade police supervisor. Seeing Greg Wang, he slightly frowned, then stood up, clicking his tongue. "It's just an unsolved case, no need to look so down and out." "What, didn't sleep last night?" Greg Wang looked at him awkwardly. "Old boss, why are you here?" It turned out that this old policeman was George Xu. When Greg Wang had just joined the police force, he was in the criminal investigation team of another county's public security bureau, and George Xu was the deputy director in charge of criminal investigation at the county bureau. Greg Wang had followed him for 6 years, solving several major cases together. George Xu had always thought highly of him and was the one who had promoted him. He was both a leader and a mentor to Greg Wang, who owed him a great deal. Later, due to his outstanding ability to solve cases, George Xu was transferred directly to the Ministry of Public Security and then later to the provincial department as the director of the 1st Criminal Investigation Division and an instructor, holding a senior expert technical title. Over the years, he also served as a professor of criminal investigation at the Provincial Public Security Bureau's training school, possessing rich theoretical and practical experience in criminal investigation. Many leaders of criminal investigation in various places in the province were considered his semi-disciples. After the old leader was transferred to the Ministry of Public Security, Greg Wang had less contact with him. In the past few years since he had been transferred back to the province, Greg Wang would visit George Xu's home every New Year. He never dreamed that the leader of the special task force established by the provincial department early this morning would be his old leader. George Xu looked at him and said, "In the past month, your county has experienced 3 extremely heinous poisoning murder cases, especially the one yesterday involving the death of the couple who were the heads of your county's police station. The crime scene was even in the residential community where your county's leaders live." The leadership at both the provincial and city levels was extremely shocked. After receiving the news in the middle of the night, the provincial department immediately convened an emergency meeting early this morning. During the meeting, a special task force was established in the name of the provincial department to take over the subsequent investigation of this case in your county. When I heard it was your county, I was worried that you would suffer, so I volunteered to be the leader of the special task force to come and see for myself, and to protect you somewhat. Greg Wang's eyes were moist, and he said with a mix of guilt and gratitude, "Old boss, you haven't directly handled a case for several years, but for my sake." George Xu smiled lightly. "I've heard about the general situation of this case. The criminal has never shown his face, and the surveillance footage from the first 2 incidents didn't capture the criminal's face. Others are afraid this major case will turn into a cold case, affecting their careers, so no one expressed willingness to take on this case during the meeting. Anyway, I'm retiring in a couple of years and don't have much of a career to worry about. Before the meeting, I spoke to Deputy Director Yao about my intentions. He knows you were trained by me and understood my meaning, so he recommended me to lead the team during the meeting, and no one else had any objections. But this case is indeed difficult to investigate. If it takes a long time to solve, and you're about to retire, wouldn't it embarrass you?" George Xu frowned. "Why do you have so little confidence in yourself?" "Me?" George Xu nodded. "This time, although I'm the leader of the special task force sent by the provincial department, the actual commander of the investigation is still you." "Why is it still me?" Greg Wang was surprised. After such an incident, it wouldn't be surprising if he was transferred to a retirement department, so why would he still be in charge of solving the case? "You followed me for years, and I've also paid attention to the cases you've solved in recent years. I have no doubts about your ability to handle cases. The case happened in Jean County, and you're more familiar with the situation in the county. If I take over the investigation, it definitely won't end well, so you're still in charge of the investigation. You need to have confidence in yourself. Before coming here, I spoke with several leaders at the provincial department about you and discussed how to deal with you. They all recognize your ability to handle cases. The cases you've solved have also been well known to the provincial leaders, so they all agreed to let you continue to solve this case. I've fought for resources for you, knowing that your county's criminal investigation personnel are few and their abilities are weak, so I've specifically brought over a dozen experienced technical backbones from the provincial department to assist you in the investigation. Additionally, people from the city bureau will also be transferred here. At the same time, the provincial department's leadership has instructed that this series of murder cases has a bad influence, so the current focus of the public security work at the provincial, city, and county levels is to solve the case. Whatever resources you need for the investigation, just ask. If you need people, we'll provide people. If you need money, we'll provide money. All units must cooperate." Greg Wang's eyes suddenly brightened, as if he had seen a light in the darkness. The criminal investigation team in their county bureau was already short-staffed, and the experience of the personnel varied greatly. Even investigating Jasmine Gon's social relationships had taken a lot of time. Now, his old leader had fought for a large amount of investigative resources for him. If they still couldn't solve the case with people and money provided, and other units and departments focusing on this case as the current work priority, then he really could just go to a retirement department. George Xu continued, "Greg, you need to have confidence in your abilities. Don't be discouraged or pessimistic. Rest assured and investigate boldly. If the case is solved, the credit is yours. If the case isn't solved, the responsibility is mine. Greg Wine awkwardly repeated, This isn't right. George Xu waved his hand. There's nothing right or wrong about it. I know your character very well. Now, let's not talk about the case. We'll discuss the case at tonight's mobilization meeting. Right now, as your old leader, or perhaps as your teacher, let's talk about your character. Greg Wine was puzzled. What's there to talk about? In recent years, almost every criminal case you've taken on has been solved, especially homicide cases, with a 100% solve rate, and the investigations have been quick and efficient. Your achievements are well known to the provincial leaders. But do you know why your achievements are so much higher than others, yet your position has never been promoted? Instead, those who followed you have been promoted, some transferred to the province, now holding higher ranks than you, while you've been stuck at the deputy director level in the county bureau. A few years ago, you were even transferred to Jean County, an inland county town. Hi. Greg Wine was well aware that it was because he didn't know how to curry favor with his superiors, but he couldn't say it out loud. George Xu sighed. You're too straightforward, always unwilling to compromise. I heard about Jean County's situation in the car. Earlier this year, the son of your county town's mayor stabbed someone to death, and you were the one who arrested him, right? Many people came to you asking for favors, but you ignored them all and gathered solid evidence, even suggesting the death penalty when appealing to the procuratorate? Just this one incident, do you know how many people you've offended? That guy could become the mayor of the county town. His connections are definitely much stronger than yours as a deputy director who relies on solving criminal cases. What good did your insistence bring you in the end? Did the procuratorate listen to you? Did the court listen to you? Didn't others just bypass you as usual? You're in charge of criminal investigation, responsible for arresting people, but after the arrest, what can you do? But if I don't even have this basic sense of justice, what's the point of wearing this police uniform? Over the years, the overall environment of the public security system had completely changed from when he first joined the police force. He often felt out of place. When he first joined the police force, catching criminals was a pleasure, a stretch of justice, a manifestation of his core values in life. Now, sometimes those who should be in jail are living freely outside, while those who shouldn't be are inexplicably imprisoned. Many people have adapted to the changes and gone with the flow, but Greg Wine has always been sticking to a police officer's duty. This is also the biggest reason for his bumpy career. George Xu continued. You are capable, that's for sure, and the leadership at the provincial, city, and county levels of public security are all well aware of it. If you didn't have this capability, given your temperament, you would have been transferred to the Archives and Protection Department long ago. But when it comes to leadership employing people, they need not only capable generals, but also confidants. Generals are sent out to fight when there's trouble, but confidants are the ones who get promoted and transferred at any time. The reason you haven't been promoted is that no leader is confident enough to consider you one of their own. So, leaders will use you at critical moments, but won't rely on you regularly. Take myself as an example. When I was transferred to the Ministry of Public Security and then to the provincial office, it wasn't just because of the few cases I solved. It was because a bunch of my old classmates held important positions in the office and the ministry, including Deputy Director Yao, who was groomed by one of my old classmates. I advise you to change your temperament. You know Deputy Director Gao Dong from the neighboring city bureau, right? He is recognized by all leaders in the provincial office as a capable official and the most promising. Everyone believes he will become the director of a major city within 10 years. Is it just because his father-in-law is the secretary of the political and legal committee? That's just a high starting point, but the rest of the path he walked on his own. You are about the same age as him. You should learn from his way of handling things. He is also a criminal investigation expert with a high case-solving efficiency. He has solved almost every major case he encountered, but at the same time, he knows how to handle minor issues, turning a blind eye when necessary, not being too stubborn. Understand? Greg Wang's face turned red, and he dared not contradict his senior leader, only nodding in agreement. I will consider it. George Xu said, you really need to think about it. I'm retiring in a few years, and my children's careers are all set. Now, what worries me the most is you. You are the one I brought up, and you are the most capable. I have always had high hopes for you, but your temperament is really not suitable for this line of work. Sigh, once this case is solved, relying on this achievement, and after I talk to some old friends, I'll try to get you transferred to a major county in the coastal city or to the Criminal Investigation Department of the City Bureau. It's not promising to stay in such an inland county town forever. Greg Wang held back his tears, moved. Boss, you've gone through so much trouble for me, George Xu patted his shoulder. Everything else is secondary. The key is that after you change your environment, you need to learn to change your temperament and be adaptable. All right, I won't say more, lest you think I'm nagging. The most important thing right now is to solve this serial murder case. If the case remains unsolved, your situation will become even more difficult. The day after Vincent Fan and his wife were murdered, Xander Su heard about it and gasped in shock. To dare to kill even the police station chief, and in the residential area where county leaders live, this case was bound to cause an uproar. Soon, he heard that the Provincial Public Security Department had set up a special task force led by the renowned criminal investigation expert George Xu, who immediately rushed to Jean County. All brother units in the surrounding counties and cities were required to assist and cooperate, with the capture of the murderer being the most important task in the near term. The Jean County Public Security Bureau and all the police stations under its jurisdiction were under the command of the Special Task Force, including the Public Security Team, the Economic Investigation Team, and other departments, which were temporarily managed by the Special Task Force for the current work arrangements. Overnight, all resources were concentrated on capturing the criminal. Xander Su was worried about Chase Chen's situation and couldn't understand one thing. According to a friend in the police, they had estimated the murderer's height from surveillance footage and simulated his approximate weight. Then, they checked the physical examination records of Jasmine Gan's classmates from several years, and all the people who matched the murderer's height were investigated, but all were excluded. Logically, height doesn't change, and even if it does, it's usually due to aging and becoming slightly hunchbacked, but it shouldn't be much different. Chase Chen was Jasmine Gan's classmate, so it should have been easy to identify him by height, but how did he avoid detection? He couldn't ask his police friend if they had investigated someone named Chase Chen. He thought maybe Chase was abroad, and the police didn't investigate deeply enough. Besides, he racked his brains but couldn't figure out who Chase Chen might have found to be his accomplice this time. The police investigation results clearly showed evidence of an accomplice in this case, and everyone knew there was an accomplice, but so far, there were no clues about whether the accomplice was male or female. Xander Su went through all the faces Chase Chen knew, but couldn't think of anyone who would risk being shot to commit the crime with him. On one hand, he was worried that under the tight net, Chase Chen would still not be able to escape. If that happened, and he was taken to the police station, if Greg Wang suspected that I was an informant, could Chase Chen withstand the interrogation without confessing? Since their last meeting, he believed Chase Chen wouldn't harm him, but under interrogation, who could maintain their stance? For such a major case that caused an uproar, once it was revealed that he was an informant, no one could protect him. After much thought, Xander Su felt completely helpless in the face of the situation. At noon, when he went out for lunch and passed by the security room at the door, he was told there was a package for him. Upon receiving it, he saw it was sent by someone he didn't recognize, with the phone number section left blank. He thought it must be the package Chase Chen mentioned last time. Carefully, he took it back to his office and secretly opened it. Inside was a delicate wooden box. Opening the box, 20 cigars were neatly arranged, each with English labels, clearly foreign goods. Xander Su frowned, wondering what was the purpose of sending a box of imported cigars. Was this what Chase Chen mentioned as something he hoped wouldn't be needed? Could there be something hidden inside the cigars? Hesitating for a moment, he pulled out a cigar and broke it open, finding only tobacco inside, nothing else. He crushed all the tobacco, confirming it was just tobacco, nothing more. What did this mean? Xander Su couldn't figure it out. But he remembered Chastin saying to never touch what he sent, he wouldn't harm me, so he decided to listen to him and set it aside. Yes, Chastin knew I've rarely smoked in recent years, so he would choose to send cigars, making it normal for me not to smoke them. He opened a drawer and shoved the cigars inside. Chastin lay tiredly in the chair at home, holding a bottle of medicine with a glass of water in front of him, water splashed around the glass. It was winter, yet he was sweating profusely. The medicine's effect on dizziness was getting shorter. He couldn't delay any longer. Vincent Fan had been dealt with, and as long as Vincent Fan's brother-in-law, Zhang Hongba, was taken care of, he could fulfill all her wishes, and everything could come to an end. Today, he had a tooth filled that was pulled half a month ago, and all follow-up work was completed, leaving only the last crime. He wondered how the police investigation was going. Surely, Vincent Fan's murder in Emperor View Garden must have caused a sensation, and the police must have added more manpower to investigate him. Going on like this, sooner or later, they would suspect him. But fortunately, after reviewing all the details of the crimes, the friend responsible for the killings never left any evidence. The police probably didn't even know the friend's gender by now. All right, that's how it needs to be. As long as that person isn't found out, it doesn't matter if they suspect me. Chastin smiled, very satisfied, without any sadness. The Special Task Force mobilization meeting had ended, and it was late at night. In Greg Wang's office, he and George Zhu lit one cigarette after another, analyzing the case. Greg Wang said, "The case isn't complicated, but the murderer is very clever." George Zhu nodded. "Today, after reviewing the detailed files and hearing about your investigation process and the sequence of events with the He family, I realized there was such a murderer. Now, the only thing clear is the motive for the crime. The murderer isn't after money, only lives, and all the victims point to Jasmine Gan's case. But the murderer's targets are selective." He paused, and Greg Wang listened intently as he continued. The first crime, the murderer's targets were River's widow and son. Obviously, River was the direct murderer who killed He Jianqing, and after Jasmine Gan killed 3 people with a bomb, River's family also sought revenge on the He family multiple times. The murderer must have seen this early on. Next, the murderer targeted Li Gang's family. Li Gang had nothing to do with the He family case, but was killed by Jasmine Gan's bomb during coordination. Afterward, Li's family also sought revenge on the He family multiple times. The murderer killed Li's family entirely because they sought revenge on the He family. The district chief, Lu Weigua, was also killed by the bomb, but his family never sought revenge on the He family, so the murderer didn't target Lu's family. After that, the murderer's target was locked on River's superior, Vincent Fan, who was the indirect murderer of He Jianqing's death. Do you see any pattern? Greg Wang thought for a moment and said, the murderer's targets fall into 2 categories, the instigators of the whole affair and those who, although not directly related to the He family, sought revenge on the He family because of Jasmine Gan. George Zhu said, if the murderer's killings follow these 2 directions, then who would be his next target if he continues to commit crimes? Greg Wang blurted out, Zhang Hongba. In the end, everything boils down to Vincent Fan's brother-in-law, who caused all this.